Hi everyone and welcome to another episode of the HeelanHub podcast, the show for small business owners. I'm Dan Heelan and it's episode 184 today, and it's pretty special because I'm joined by a guest. It's not just me talking to you today. I'm joined by special guest and personal branding expert Sam Winsbury. In this one you can hear about Sam's journey building a leading personal branding agency, and I'm going to plug him for, of course, personal branding tips that we can all steal and use in our everyday business life. So let's get into it. So hi Sam, welcome to the show.
Hi Dan, thanks for having me on. 184 episodes. Wow.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a journey all through probably the COVID type years, but we're getting there. You know, it was all right. I think we started it just before, maybe I want to say 2020, 2019, something like that. I've enjoyed podcasting for many years in different stages, so this one was an easy pick. I thought actually I don't talk about accountancy and tax, so let's go and do that. And obviously business is a good topic. So but no, really pleased that you could join us because I think you can have a load of insight, and what I'm particularly excited to hear about as well is your own business journey and how that's how that's been treating you over the years and what some key learnings are from there. Now so you're kind of a dual threat, I guess, for a podcast guest. That's going to be really cool. So I think it's good then to give the listeners a bit of info about you, because you know some people hopefully would have heard of you, especially if they're on LinkedIn, as we're going to hear. They probably come across you somewhere along the lines, but let's hear a bit about you. So Sam, who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, so I, as you said, run a company called Kurogo. We're a personal branding agency, so we work with typically entrepreneurs and execs, and we help them become the go-to person in their industry by building their personal brand. And this is a business that I actually set up about 5 years ago or so now. Just graduated out of university. I'd always been very entrepreneurial, and kind of throughout university I stumbled into marketing, was helping a few businesses with their marketing, and got into the world of LinkedIn somehow, which, as you can probably imagine, in 2019 for a university student to be posting on LinkedIn and building a personal brand was a pretty strange thing. But I stumbled into it, got fairly good at it just by posting my own content out of pure interest on the platform. A few people started asking me for help with building out their own profiles and what they should be posting. So I quite naturally fell into a bit of coaching, consulting whilst I was at uni. And then as soon as I graduated, it happened to be in the middle of the pandemic, I was living in my girlfriend's spare uni bedroom and decided to build an agency out of it. And 5 years later, we're probably 20 odd people by the time this goes out, will be. So it's been quite a ride.
Fantastic. And those initial clients, what sort of demographic were they then? Was because it's always interesting. We deal with a lot of startups and growth businesses, and of course that's all ages, particularly a lot of people in the young sort of 20s. And my self-employed journey started off in my young 20s, and I remember it because you come up with these people who had a lot more experience than you, and age can be both a benefit and a downside sometimes where that's concerned. How did you find it then? What sort of demographic were your original clients?
It was a massive range. You know, I had one who was a German language coach, lady from Germany. I had a couple that were just starting agencies themselves. So a lot of my early clients were kind of 1 to 7 person agency teams. I think it was quite a hot topic for them at the time. But then I had another who was the CEO of one of the leading software development companies in the UK. So it was a massive range of like individual coaches, consultants, small businesses who have probably been in business maybe a year or so and were just getting started, all the way through to one of the big software developers in the UK. So it was a big mix.
Awesome. And you mentioned about those initial kind of consultancy pieces. Was there a particular job that was kind of the one that made it for you? You don't have to name names, of course, but was it like you were like, yeah, this is the one where they're paying real money and we can actually make some money out of this?
There was. It wasn't actually the real money that this client paid. I think they paid about £300 per month, which for what we did for them, we charge about 10 times that now for the exact services that the client was on. So it was a really small project actually at the time, but they then referred me to probably 4 or 5 more clients, and were really good about actually bringing me into their network and gave me a shout out on LinkedIn. And that was actually the catalyst for me going from just a one-man team in my partner's uni bedroom to actually building out a team, hiring my first few employees. So whilst it wasn't a massive deal in and of itself, it led to maybe 4 or 5 more clients, of which some of them were much bigger.
And how hard was it to get the first one? That's always interesting, I think. How much painful was it?
My approach to the first few was I actually worked for free for a couple of people. So my thought process was go out to people that are fairly influential and offer to do some work for them for free. gets you in the door. It's pretty low risk for them. Obviously, the risk is all on me, but I think you, in your early days, you kind of have to take those risks and you have to back yourself. I was in the very fortunate position. I appreciate not everyone is in this position where I was living off a student loan as a student, so I could kind of afford to actually do a bit of free work and give it my time for free to do it. But what that meant is that I could get my foot in the door. Very low stakes for them, because for them to trust a student with their LinkedIn profile, which is quite a personal thing, is obviously a massive commitment. So it reduced the stakes for them, made it easier for them to say yes, and gave me a chance to prove the value of what I was doing. So I got a couple of clients by doing that. And then I was just pretty cheap, to be really honest with you. Like, I wasn't charging big fees because I didn't have loads and loads of proof or confidence at that point. So it was either by being free or cheap was how I got the first few, proved the value to them, and then I had some case studies to work with, started getting some referrals. And I think at that point, you almost earn the right to start charging a little bit more.
Yeah, no, and I think that's very common as well. You see a lot of interesting. I mean, we talk about pricing constantly with clients and people who, they're established and they're just not charging enough, and we go through that process of that. Particularly, I think half the time it's mindset around their worries about who might not suddenly do business with them, and if you've been doing our job for as long as I have, that it's just not the case. Like, it will be fine. You will maybe lose the odd person, but it's actually genuinely, if you're doing a great job, it's fine. But it's a very normal journey of not charging enough when you start out. I remember I think back to what I was charging 18 odd years ago in a conservatory in this job. I was like, wow, okay, and people still charge some of that kind of money now, and I don't even know how they cover their overheads doing it. But there are, it is kind of a natural thing. And did you find that, it doesn't sound like it, but did you find the age thing a problem when you first started out then?
Only myself personally. It was a limiting belief that I had for myself for maybe a year or two, which is actually why I think it took me a little bit longer to get going. So before the agency actually started, there's probably a year or two in there of me really battling myself as a student, not getting too many clients at all, struggling. That is the reality. But I think it was all self-imposed. I had a few people made comments about it when you get on calls. They say, "Oh, you look young." To be honest, I still get that now because look at me. I don't look 30. I'm not 30 yet, but I certainly don't look anywhere near it. I still get the comments now, but I think it is largely a self-imposed thing. I've had plenty of people that have trusted me and proved that age just shouldn't be a factor. So
No, I love that. I mean, I'm always interested in it because I know from my own story, being sort of early 20s in an accountancy world, when you're full of what bizarrely I'm now becoming a grey-haired older guy.
What age did you start the business?
Well, it was I've been doing it 18 years, but I mean, I've been self-employed since I was probably 22, but in accountancy, 24, I think it was, something along those lines. Maybe. Just trying to think about when that was. I'd have to actually look at the dates, but it was early, before I'd reached my mid-20s, I think. And but then I used to think of it as, I think people looked at it as this young guy that was really passionate about accounting and knew his stuff, and they'd come from a traditional accountant that never really kept up with what was going on, or there was never, that proactive feeling that people were looking for. And particularly when you're nimble on your own, it's very easy to deliver that kind of thing easily. And it's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, because obviously you're in a personal branding world. People hired you initially for your skills. I think one of the things that owners often worry is, how do we scale this? So how did you end up finding the talent, and how did you go around scaling the business past you? Because obviously you've got clearly a natural talent for this kind of stuff. How did that work?
Yeah, to be honest, we got some of our early hires were absolutely exceptional, and some of them are still with us today. So, it was a battle getting me out of the kind of day-to-day, and I had this big mindset block around the first few clients. I just couldn't step away from those clients. I was so worried about what they'd think. They've bought into me, and now I'm basically, someone else is servicing them. So that was a massive blocker. But I think over time, as we've built the team and attracted really talented people, I now have full trust in them. And in fact, there's people in my team that are far better at delivering these sorts of things than me, and a far better placed at doing it. So it's taken some time. I think I'd like to say it was entirely deliberate, but the truth is we probably got lucky with a few of our early hires that happened to be exceptional people. Some of them we didn't get quite right as well. But some of the early ones that were right and are still with us today have completely changed the kind of trajectory of the business, and have allowed me to just give them full trust to run it and know that they'll do it just as well, if not better than I will, and leaves me to actually kind of step outside and look at working on the business, not just in it. So, it was iterations over time. It's taken 4 years it took for me to actually get out of the day-to-day. There are still times I get brought into it now, for sure. It's relative running a business, I'm sure you'll get it. So it's, iterative over time, but certainly getting a few good hires in the early days massively helped it.
And we just did a recent podcast actually talking to Kay, a HR expert, and who gets involved a lot with recruitment and obviously the people side of it. And as a business ourselves that is a people business, we need people. That's what we sell effectively. It's always interesting to talk to people about it. Where did you find those first few hires?
So one of them, the first ever hire, was a student who was building their own personal brand. And I just said, do you want to come and do some part-time work? So it's quite an easy relationship to build initially. And then the others, we were just putting job ads out on LinkedIn, and we happened to get a few good people apply. Some came through referrals and network. There was one, a guy called Jake. He's now our director of client services. He had an account management role at a fairly established agency and just happened to stumble across one of our ads. This was in really early stages. He's still with us today. Obviously now when we post, we've got a bit more of a presence in the industry. We're quite well known within the personal branding industry, and if we put a job ad out, we typically get thousands of applicants for each role. So now, because we've got the brand presence, and because I guess my personal brand is fairly strong, we attract a lot of talent naturally. In the early days, we just happened to stumble across a few good people. Of course, our kind of qualification process and our interview process has massively improved since then as well. So we're able to work out in the process now who are the A players, who is the best talent out of that 100 people pool. But it's very competitive, so we're in a fortunate position.
Love it. I love it. Well, let's talk about that then. So you say about fortunate position. What's been the kind of biggest success that you or your team have had? And this can be, success is interesting, isn't it? I work in a world of finance, so quite often people are telling me about turnovers or profits, but I know from my own business journey, normally that's not actually what the biggest success is. It's probably something else, but could be for you. But what has been the kind of some notable successes that you thought, yeah, this is cool?
Yeah, the fact that we've got a team, everyone in the team is under 40 years old, I believe. So a pretty young team of people who are learning as we go along, but have now got up to having worked with 300 personal brands, some of which are some of the biggest names of entrepreneurs in the UK, and are massively even like affecting policy and the way the UK is run, what it's like for other businesses in the UK. Just the impact that our clients are having is enormous, and we're behind the scenes working on those people, and have done it for over 300 clients is to me quite astonishing. As a remote team as well, we don't have an office. We've got team all over the world. There are some team members I've never met before in person. So that was. I don't tend to sit back and actually reflect on what we've achieved and never be proud of it, because I'm so driven to kind of push further and keep achieving more. But recently at one of our team socials, I did sit back and I went, actually, what we've done is pretty cool in 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's, and funny enough, I have the same sort of thing when I think about mine. Is it's normally the team that I've built and the work that we do for our clients rather than anything else. But I think you have to have a certain amount of enjoyment of that process to want to continually put yourself through it. Because as we talk about now, what's been the biggest challenges for the business?
Yeah, ironically, team. So we've touched on team a fair bit, but it is actually the hardest thing. I think what I didn't realise is that when you hire 19 people, the number of relationships in an organisation doesn't just go up by one each time. It's constantly multiplying. And our people are brilliant, but I think in any business, there's going to be things that go wrong with people. There's going to be challenges. Humans are humans. We've got emotions, and managing all of those alongside 30, 40 clients who are all also people at any one time is extremely difficult. And I think in the early days, I tried to keep everyone happy, which was a massive mistake. I thought it was my job to make sure everyone was happy all the time. But I think you have to accept that if you're trying to keep everyone involved in your business happy every minute of the day, you're going to be very miserable. And actually, it's not your job to do that. It's just the realities of working in a business. Some days you're going to have bad days. And of course, we want to make it a great place for our team to work and a great business that gets amazing results for our clients and them to have a good experience. But I think the expectation that it's going to be like that every minute of every waking day is ridiculous and makes for a very unhappy business owner.
No, it's crazy, isn't it? I mean, I've worked with, and I was talking to you about this recently, we've just hit a milestone of 3,000 clients that we've worked with over the years. And I think about the amount of conversations I've had. And if I polled those all on, a few hands, I could tell you that the top issues in most businesses and people would be almost exclusively at number one once someone has one, right? It's people are people. What always surprises me is the impact that people's personal life has on their work life, and having that good balance between, I suppose, empathy for the situation and also what needs to occur and how that behaviour impacts at work and things like that. So, it's interesting to hear you say that. But it is the most difficult bit. But it's also, I think, because we started there, didn't we? The most rewarding part of the building process can be that as well.
There's probably a reason why it's both the hardest and the most rewarding. I think they're probably related to each other.
Definitely, and I think we also work in a world where I know particularly, I remember in the early days of our journey, you had hardly like no one left because you were always building, and you had some diehards, and then as you get slightly bigger, some people decide they're not on that train because you'll turn into something that you weren't when they joined and they didn't sign up for that, and that's that's okay. And we live in a world where people are also quite dynamic. We've got tiny turnover in terms of people, but whenever one person, normally one person and goes, it's still a challenging thing to deal with all the time, isn't it? You've got to constantly recruit. Do you find that? Do you have that problem where someone just takes a new opportunity or does something else?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was far tougher in the early days when we didn't really have much of a culture, and there was no real, I wouldn't say there's a real reason or incentive to be here. I think that's changed a lot more now. We have a much stronger culture. People really feel like they're making a difference, but especially in the early days, we had people that would come in and then, very shortly after just go off and do their own thing or decide it wasn't right. And at times I felt like I'd almost failed those people. But again, you realise that the reality is sometimes people aren't made for certain jobs. They're kind of made to do other things, and that's perfectly okay. So yeah, definitely in the early stages when we didn't really have a real reason for people to be at this company, the turnover tended to be high. And now we've got a bit more of a culture. There's more of a brand around us. We feel like we're on a bit more of a collective mission. Retention's much higher, and the team is much stronger, I think.
Yeah, that's cool. And I also think you just don't know what people do in life. I mean, from 18 to what was probably 22 maybe, I was a retail manager, and I love that job. Probably the best job I've ever had in terms of fun time. Loved it. And one day, it's a sad event. My dad died overnight, and I decided, I got up sort of 2 days later and thought, I don't want to do this anymore. Couldn't tell you why. Just decided not to, and I think everybody was surprised then because they were like, "Oh, we've got big things planned for you," and I had no reason to quit that job, but I quit it and went self-employed the next day and never looked back. But no rhyme or reason, so you never know in people's lives. Sometimes someone decides that's it for them for whatever their reason. So. But yeah, so just I think it always adds to the challenges of what you're building on top of everything else. And then I always look at this with football teams. You hear about this integrating new players, and I always think that's also part of the challenge. You mentioned culture. Anyway, I suppose we're not here to talk about culture and people because that could be an entire show, and I think we just did one. But interesting that you mentioned that. So that's really cool. Now, look, I'm an accountant, so it'd be remiss of me not to ask about the finance aspects of the business in terms of what's been your biggest challenge in terms of accounts, tax, money management, that kind of stuff as you were growing the business.
Getting paid.
Yeah.
Funny thing with clients, they love to not pay.
Yep, they do.
Made a lot of mistakes in the early years that, I probably still owed about 20 grand worth of stuff of work that I did in the early years and foolishly completed without getting payment, which I don't imagine I'll ever get back. So that's a big one. Even now, we often struggle with getting paid, like everyone paying on time is challenging across 40 odd clients, which of course in a cash flow business causes cash flow problems, which you don't want. So that's a big one. Not understanding our numbers actually and what they meant for a long time. If there's one piece of advice I could give to any other business owner in early years is track all of your numbers and know your numbers long before you think you need them. Because people were telling me to do this and I was like, I don't need to know this numbers. I've got 2 staff. I just need to get more clients in. But actually looking back on it, I wish I had all of that data. A year later I was going, if I just had the numbers, I could actually make an informed decision on certain things. And I think you'll never regret having more data to work with. So not getting a good grip on our numbers and actually knowing what they were day to day was a massive mistake. Should have done that earlier. And by that, I mean, yes, things like the profit that you're making, margins, etc., net and gross, the difference between them, but also how many leads do you need to get in order to book a certain number of calls with clients, and how many calls do you need to take in order to sign a certain number of clients, and what is the average lifetime value of those clients? Because if you have all of that information, you have a bit more predictability in your business. And when something goes wrong or something changes or a pandemic happens and your world is flipped on its head, at least you've got something to work off. So not having a solid grip on our numbers, or at least not paying enough attention to them in the early years, was a big mistake I'd made. So I'd definitely change that if I could go back.
Yeah, I love that. And I also think it's one of the cool things about the internet, how it's developed. I mean, you've got influencers like Alex Hormozy, who's actually, I presume you've probably come across him given what you do. And I think one of the cool things that he brings to it, if anybody hasn't heard, he's a very successful American kind of entrepreneur. And he does a lot of educational content around business models, and he uses numbers. And what's really cool about that is it's one of the elements of business that doesn't get talked about very often in our world. Is what we do. We see the numbers. We those kind of models. I've done how many shows I've talked about. Monitoring the model and having to change it. And he brings a really good education to the wider masses on this. So I think these kind of things, it means that more people have got the shot of having what you were missing. Because as you say, if you know what your cost of how much it costs to get a client costs, but what that average lifetime costs you, and you know what the cash flow of that looks like, you can really do some really cool things that can really help your growth or kill it with a lot of small businesses. As you said, you tend to bumble your way through, not do it very well, and then figure it out as you go. But if the education's there and you can get it, even better. So
it's cash is the only thing that kills a business, really, isn't it? Is you run out of cash. That's all it is. So it just makes sense to know. I think at the start I'll be honest, I thought it was boring and complicated. But as I've progressed as a business owner and the business has got larger, I've realised it's actually the most fun and most interesting part of a business. I think if you nail that, there's no limit to what you can achieve, to be honest.
No. Also, think as it scales, it becomes weird. It is real, but it doesn't. It's just everything's not your money, and it's all there's like it's hard when you've got like I remember the early days when you've not got a lot in the bank and you're just chasing it to make payroll. It's always like it's almost easier, and then you get to a point where actually you need the models and the data because your brain can't comprehend the churn of that money and where it goes and what happens, and you need it. So yeah, you're right. But I love one of the things I love what you said there is that you pick non-financial data as well, lead numbers, conversion rates, how many, because if you know those numbers, like we know here, we know if we do X video or we do this or we do that, we're going to generate X leads. It means there's an uptick of, I don't know, so it's 4 leads a week. We know how many we're going to convert. We know how many calls that and no shows, like, and you can make decisions with those numbers. So love that. Love that. Right, let's talk about personal branding then. I appreciate you sharing your story with that. So I think we talked to loads and loads, as we said, small business owners, both our own clients, but also out in the internet and the wider world, particularly on YouTube. And that we wear many hats, but what does personal branding mean? Because it's one of those things, personal branding is like up here in the clouds, isn't it, sometimes when someone says it. What does that mean to you and your average small business owner?
Yeah, so personal branding is just the conscious control of your own reputation as the business owner online. So nowadays, people really buy into other people rather than just faceless brands. They're more interested in hearing about the people behind the business. Ultimately, in a lot of cases, that's going to be the people they're working with, right? They're going to be working with other people. So it's really just being conscious about how you are perceived online. Because the truth is, when people come across you, they're going to make a snap judgment about you anyway. They're going to make a more informed judgment over time, but regardless, they're going to judge you. You can't prevent that. It's human nature to judge people and to form opinions of them. So you might as well positively bias that judgment they make. I can't see a world where it wouldn't be beneficial for people to think more highly of you, right? And this personal branding thing, it's not this crazy thing. It's not about forging a false representation of yourself or pretending to be someone online that you're not. It's just about framing the skills, the experience, the expertise, the personality you do have in the best way possible so you get the credit you deserve. Right? So it's about framing, not forging. Because I think a lot of business owners almost don't get the credit they deserve. They tend to be very, very good at what they do, but not very good at talking about it. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, that wasn't really a problem. If you're really good at what you do, your work would do the talking, work would get out. It's like, build it and they will come, was the kind of mentality. Today, we live in a far more competitive world where every industry is more accessible. It's harder than ever to stand out. And if you're leaving your work to do the talking, no one's going to hear about you. So you need to have a way of getting out there. And personal brand is the best way to do that.
Yeah, I think more and more people, I think probably everybody that you speak to, if you said to them, who do you know in your sector that you think does a worse job than you, but seems to be more successful than you? Like, and it's because probably they're more well known. That's, it does make.
It's no longer a case that the best business or the best product wins. It's the best known. Obviously, you want to be both, right? We should all be trying to be both, but you can't just have one without the other anymore.
No, not in a world. And I think it's been really interesting to watch over, as a child of the 80s, watch the the different shift, and even I would say in the last 10 years, because you've got the next generation of business owners coming through who are native to social media, and they're native, so them sticking their head in front of, because they're used to Snapchat or whatever, them sticking their head in front of Instagram and talking is not going to be that unnatural. I still think there's a lot of people who aren't comfy with that, like masses of people that aren't. I mean, even our own team, the amount of time I try and get somebody to come on camera and they're like, oh, I don't know about that. I'm like, come on, like I've seen your Facebook, like you'll be fine. But it means that, yeah, as you say, I think if you're not out there doing these and thinking about these things, it's going to be a concern. So on that, then, if you've got a small business owner that wants to improve their personal brand, but let's just say they haven't got, you hear all this advice about go get a team and all, most small business owners just do not have the time, mainly, or the money to do that kind of stuff. But if they've got a couple of hours a week, where should they start?
So the very first thing you want to do is work on what we call your positioning. And your positioning is really, really important, because if you forget this and you jump to the content bit that everyone tells you to do, it's not going to be clear to your audience why they should work with you, why they should listen to you, whether they can trust you or not. And all of the effort you put into creating content is essentially going to go to waste, right? Because who says something matters just as much as what they say. So if you want people to kind of listen to you and actually trust what you say and understand what you say, you need to be seen as someone worth listening to in the first place. And that's where this kind of framing piece really comes into practice. Actually getting your expertise, your credibility, your experience, your skill set across in the most compelling and understandable way possible. If you don't do this, you're going to put loads and loads of time and effort into creating content that no one consumes. If I give the example of a 20-year-old life coach, it will kind of hammer the point home. No one would work with a 20-year-old life coach. That's why you don't get 20-year-old life coaches, because they're not seen as people worth listening to for life advice. They simply haven't had enough life experience, right? And you'll be seen like the 20-year-old life coach if you ignore your positioning. But if you get it right, instantly you'll become compelling and almost magnetic. People will want to listen to you. People will be following you for more advice. People will actually be reaching out to work with you off the back of your content. So your positioning is the very first thing. And there's three main things you can actually build out to get really solid positioning. One is what we call proof. So proof is objective third-party evidence that you're good at what you do. And you mentioned earlier in the episode 3,000 clients you've worked with. That's a great proof point. I kind of trust you as an accountant because you've done it for 3,000 people. If you got to 3,000 people and weren't good at what you do, I'd be very surprised, right? So you've got instant credibility. The other thing is a promise. So this is kind of like your personal value proposition. What are people actually going to get out of following you? What's the kind of transformation that you're going to take them on? And the final thing is packaging, which is how do you bring in the things that are unique about you, your points of difference, whether that's personality or maybe the approach that you use with your customers or your clients, the model you use, some sort of unique perspective or point of view or point of difference that separates you from everyone else. And if you can get your proof, promise, and packaging nailed down, you're going to have really strong positioning.
I love that. And from a practical point, is there something that they should do in terms of, is there a platform that they should start on, or, you hear this advice, post every day. I do post every day, so I'm not saying it's bad advice. I'm just saying, like, you hear this, but is that what they should be doing?
Yeah, so you should pick your platform based on two things, based on what's natural to you and where you're actually going to be able to produce good content and where your audience spend time. So if you're really good on camera, probably do YouTube. If you're a terrible writer, don't try and do Twitter or LinkedIn, right? But if you're actually quite good at writing or you don't like being on camera so much, maybe choose a platform like LinkedIn. So work with your own strengths to begin with, but also think about where your audience are, right? So if you're targeting other business owners, for example, LinkedIn is an absolute no-brainer. If you're targeting the 50-plus-year-old business owner, probably don't go to TikTok. Right, so think about where your audience is spending time, and then based on those platforms, pick the one that you're best suited to. I think if you can post every day, that's great, and I'd encourage people to push for that, generally speaking. But even if you're posting 2 or 3 times a week, that's more content than most of your competitors. I think if you're limited, if you're a very busy business owner that has a couple of hours a week to work on this, just focus on producing maybe 3 really high-quality posts, rather than doing 7 posts a week that are low quality. As you start to see results, then you can start scaling it up and you can actually increase the output. You can get to the amazing place you're in now and produce lots of content across all channels every week. That's kind of the gold standard. But when you're just getting started, don't try and do that because you won't be able to stick to it. Just do a few pieces of really high quality content on one particular channel.
I like that. I like that. And I actually think, I mean, for our own experience of doing this, is the posting every day across multiple channels and stuff. The only benefit to me on that initially, and that's as somebody that has a business where we do create a relative amount of content, is it teaches you what works and what doesn't work quickly. Because we post some stuff and I just think, yeah, I've spent ages on that and it'll perform really badly. And it's like, why does it perform? And the cool thing is, and I find this in business generally, the market doesn't care about your feelings. It just cares about, is it any good? What am I getting from it? And it's like, so it's I don't know what the word is. You need a certain amount of resilience to keep going. That's the only benefit I see of when they're like post quantity. I'm like, because you need to learn. But I think if you knew what you were doing, oddly, I think there's a really good time plus reach balance between probably doing 3 really good bits that you knew were going to do it. If you could really do it, I don't know. It's interesting, isn't it? Like, I suppose if you wrote 3 of my LinkedIn posts every week, I'd probably get more reach and results than me doing 7. You know?
Sure. It's the age-old quality versus quantity debate, isn't it? And which one comes first? You produce more, you tend to get better at it. But if you produce less, you have more time to make it better. Like, which one do you do?
Yeah.
So I don't have the answer. My advice, though, start with 3 and then scale it up from there. If you've got loads of time or you've got a big team that can work on this, by all means, start with doing 5, 6, 7 posts a week across multiple platforms. Learn faster. But the reality is a lot of people aren't blessed with that luxury.
No, it also just takes a considerable amount of time. As somebody does this, we're talking about this now. We're doing this late in the evening for both of us because we're both busy people who've got other stuff to do. And then, there's post-production and all the other things that go with it. So I totally get that. Now, I think as well, people worry about, we mentioned about people that don't want to necessarily put themselves out there. They might see it as like cringy, or they see a lot of people, lots of selfies and all the rest of it. Where do you sit on that and personal branding? Do you have to do that to get your personal brand rolling?
You certainly don't need to be sharing photos of your dinner or endless selfies. It's not entirely necessary. There's a way to do it that isn't as cringe. There is a certain amount of, you've got to get over yourself and push the comfort zone. Because the first piece of content you publish, whatever you publish, is going to make you feel uncomfortable. I can remember the first time I posted on LinkedIn, I was doing a video. I was literally shaking as I was recording the video because I was so scared to post it. But if I hadn't posted that video, I don't know if I would have actually posted ever again. You just got to push the comfort zone and get over the cringe. And as you start to do that more and more, it becomes easier. Now I'll rattle off a LinkedIn post without even worrying about it. Quite frankly, I don't care necessarily how people perceive. I care how people perceive me, but if I get a negative reaction or someone taking the mick out of me, I don't care, right? Because I know it's doing good for my business. So you do have to kind of get over it and understand that this is going to help grow your business and is going to be an asset that you can leverage for the rest of your life. And are you really going to let a little bit of discomfort get in the way of that? So, yeah, you don't need to be doing loads and loads of selfies. You don't necessarily have to be doing loads of video, but you do need to be publishing content and putting yourself out there.
Yeah, no, I like that. And when you say about selfies and content, there's this whole idea of being authentic. That was a buzzword. It's not as buzzy these days, but I think maybe going back a few years ago on LinkedIn, that was all the rage. All you had was, weirdly, you don't see a lot of those people anymore. Well, I don't, but there was a lot of, I don't know if that actually, I don't know if that correlates or not, but I remember I can instantly thought that. I haven't given this much thought until now, but I'm like, I remember so-and-so and so-and-so, and I don't see them anymore, but they used to be 3 posts a week. It was always open and authentic, maybe lots of crying. I don't know, I'm just making stuff up now. But what does authenticity look like in practice, and is it important?
I think people massively over-index on trying to be authentic. You don't have to try to be authentic. Like if you're trying, you're probably not being authentic. So I would encourage people to almost forget about that entirely, and you'll probably land on a much more authentic way of posting if you just don't think about it anyway. Yes, it matters to an extent. You don't want your online presence to be wildly different from your actual personality, because then when people do meet you, they'll think, oh, that's odd. Dan's really cool online, but in person, he's introverted and didn't really talk to me or whatever. And you obviously don't want that. But I think people do try too hard to be authentic and work too hard on their authenticity. Just act like you are normally, and that's all you need to do.
I love that. Yeah, I think it is a fine line. I mean, funny enough, we talk about it internally sometimes. I'm like, can you just check this post? Do I sound like an absolute, can't say the word because we're family friendly, but like, do I sound like that on there? And sometimes one of the team will get, yeah, you do. And I'm like, okay, that draft's getting binned. Let's rewrite that. So it's difficult. And again, I think there's a balance of what you want to say. Interesting you say about people. So one of the things people often say about this when I talk to owners about it is they're like, oh, I worry about putting myself out there because I'm just going to get hate, or people are going to be in my comments or whatever. And now I've got my own experience of this, but how have you found that? Is it actually an everyday occurrence? Like how's it work?
So in the last 5 years, we've published as a team over 40,000 pieces of content. I could count on one hand the number that actually received meaningfully negative responses. The odds are just so low, especially on a platform like LinkedIn. Some other platforms, Instagram, TikTok, are a little bit less forgiving, but LinkedIn tends to be a pretty forgiving place, and it is so unlikely. Sure, you're going to get some people that disagree with you, but that's absolutely fine. In fact, I think if no one's ever disagreeing with you, you're probably not posting strong enough content. But like genuinely negative responses, it rarely ever happens. When you put a piece of content out, you will know if it's going to get a negative response, and just don't post it, right? Like the odds of it actually happening, if you really think about your content, are so low that I wouldn't worry about it. Unless you're being deliberately offensive, it's so rare that it actually happens.
Now, it's interesting. It marries with my own experiences of this, particularly with YouTube. Before I started putting videos there, I thought, what are people going to do? Like, I've seen the cesspit that is gaming. So, I'm a geek. I like my gaming, and not that I play any of it these days. But, when I started doing YouTube, I would have been heavily in there. And I used to read the comments and see that the vitriol that people put in there. And I thought, this is what I'm putting myself out there for. You can imagine, especially when you talk about tax. Like, it's sometimes a charged subject. But actually, it's overwhelmingly, my daughter who works with me now, she was looking at some the other day, and she said all these people say really nice stuff. I'm like, yeah, they do say nice stuff. It's you get the odd person, but what I found is, and I heard it somewhere, I can't remember who said it. I was online, some influencer online, and they said that the wider it gets and the colder that audience, the more you tend to see, and that has played itself out to be true repeatedly. I find it on TikTok, so I've had a few videos go from like 135,000 to like 800 and something thousand, and when you reach that level, you'll get people who just, they're like, I hate tax. Why are you paying tax? And then once you reach that level, I'm like, I know this is taking off now. Because my people are the ones where it's like, we don't want to pay any more than we need to, but we're okay paying it. Like it does tend to be that way. So, but yeah, overwhelmingly, I've found it. If you're not out there trying to wind people up, that it's it's often a no. Interesting though. 40,000 pieces of content. That's some good going. Do you ever get bored?
I don't do a load of actual content creation now for clients. So personally, no, I largely just create my own. So personally, no. I'm sure if you ask my team behind closed doors, they might, some of them might say I'm a little bit bored, but they're sticking around, so they can't be that bored. But I mean, we do it across such a variety of clients that, there's always something interesting to talk about. Even within one client, there are so many like individual lines, individual stories that we can go into. So it's not something we're bored of yet, and I hope we don't get to that stage anytime soon.
I can imagine. Now, I think when we talk about boredom and what people do, I think sometimes that leads into owners making mistakes. What's the most common mistakes you see from business owners trying to build these personal brands?
Not doing it long enough is probably the biggest killer of personal brands. People do it for a month and expect to see life-changing results. It's just not how it works. I'd say if you're not going to at least test this for 6 months, don't bother starting in the first place. That's my minimum length of testing that you should be doing. If you're not going to post for 6 months before you make a decision on whether it's working or not, then just don't start. It won't be worth it. So people give up way too soon. I think a lot of the reason people give up way too soon is because they hear this advice, which is just post. They're told just post. But I think personally it's terrible advice. Because if you just post, you're going to post average content with no strategy that's not going to get results. You're going to get downhearted and you're going to give up. And then 3 months later, you come back and you start the cycle again. So don't just post. That's why I talked about positioning earlier on. Like, start with a strategy and then actually produce content. That's going to give you a much better platform to build off and actually get some good results that are going to give you the motivation to keep going. So, I mean, the length of time people post for is a big one. A lot of people think they have to change the world with every single post. They can never just produce a simple piece of content or can't even reuse old content that they've shared before. They don't want to. They think, I can't talk about that. I spoke about a similar topic 6 weeks ago. Again, big mistake, because people don't remember. People need to be told again, and people actually want to hear content from you. Like, they want to hear the same message over and over again. So those are probably the biggest ones that halt people's growth.
I love that. Now, and I think as well, you work in the LinkedIn world, right, quite heavily. Would you say that's your main platform?
Yeah, definitely. Probably 95% of my work is on LinkedIn.
Awesome. So if we spin back, I suppose, to that initial question and think about some final practical tips to give the audience in terms of small business owner, limited on time. LinkedIn is obviously a big business to business affair, which actually, am I right in presuming it's still about 1-2% of people that actually post on that platform? Is that the stats?
Weekly, yeah, 1 or 2% of people post a weekly cadence of content. Yeah.
Yeah, see, so we can, in theory, still make big impact on this. What's some practical pointers? I know you've given loads of value in here. If you had to summarize it up, what would you want someone to take away from this podcast and go and start to do now?
So once you've got your promise, proof, and packaging from your positioning, make sure your promise and your proof are really clear in your profile. So your profile should clearly state who you help, what you help them achieve, and why you're credible to help them do that. So basically proof that you're an expert. That's really important because if you go to produce content, you're going to be sending people to your profile. And if you've got an unoptimized profile, it would be like spending loads of money on ads, sending people to a website that's not optimized. It would be a waste, right? So it's going to be a waste of effort on your content if your profile's not optimized. So that's definitely the first thing I'd do. Consistent basic content. If you can get 2 or 3 pieces of content out a week as a minimum, that's great. Some of your content, you want to focus purely on just reaching new people. It's called growth-based content. Some of your content is more about building trust with your audience. This is authority content, so you're showing your expertise or providing value. And that allows you to do the final type of content, which is what we call conversion. And that's slightly more promotional. If you do the first 2 types of content right, you almost earn the right to be a little bit more promotional.
Awesome.
So get those 3 types.
I love that. And just to pick into that slightly more, so if you can, off the top of your head, can you just give us a quick example of each of one of those 3, the growth, the authority, and the other one?
Yeah, so a growth-based piece of content might be something like me talking about how I lead my team of 19 remote employees. It's probably not necessarily, it's not going to convince you to hire me to build your personal brand, but it might interest you enough to click follow on my profile. It's quite broadly targeted. Lots and lots of people are going to be interested in that. Lots of people are going to see it, and a good proportion of them are going to click follow on my profile. So I've got people kind of into my world. They now know who I am. That means that when I post a piece of authority-based content, which is probably going to be a little bit more in-depth around how to build a personal brand specifically that shows off my expertise, firstly, they're actually going to pay attention to it and read it and put the effort into reading it. They're going to get some value from it, and they're going to start to trust me as an expert on personal branding specifically. If I do those 2 things, I've got more people that know who I am. Of that pool of people that know who I am, a lot of them are starting to trust me. That means when I post a conversion piece of content, which might be something like a client case study, maybe a lead magnet that we've produced, again, people are much more likely to read them and then book a call with us off the back of it to see how we can help them. So it's quite a natural flow that people will follow.
I love that. I think there's some real practical tips in there. And you mentioned value. And to me, this has been absolutely jam-packed with ideas and tips. And I think particularly with personal branding, there's so much to it. I know you always explain it like it's really easy and here's the main concepts and it's cool. You're right. These concepts are key, but I'm sure the listeners, there'll be people out there thinking, actually, I could do with hearing more from this guy. And I'm sure you've got tons of lead magnets and other conversion content, as you would have called it, that will help them along this way. So if they need some help, where would they best get in touch with you, find out more from you?
Yes, the best place is if you go to my LinkedIn profile. I'm Sam G. Winsbury on LinkedIn. And in the top section of my profile, there's a little link that will take you to a personal brand assessment or a scorecard. So you can actually test how strong your personal brand currently is. And then based on your answer, or based on the results that you get, it's going to give you some very tailored advice for your current scenarios. That's a really good place to start. There's also a full guide for 2026 that we have just published that's in my featured section on my profile. So that's a really great resource for people that want kind of a comprehensive guide as well.
I love it. Fantastic. Well, Sam, thanks very much for joining us on the show. I'm sure the listeners are going to get a ton out of that. I certainly got a load out of this conversation as well. I'm going to steal some of these tips and put them in place.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Thanks for being on the show. Well, hopefully you've enjoyed and got as much value as I have from today's show. If you have, make sure to subscribe via your favourite app so you don't miss an episode. You can also review us on those apps. If you get 2 minutes, which would be great for our visibility. Love reading those if we get time even to say a few words. For more business insight and tax tips, be sure to connect with me and my great team across all the social media channels, including some of the ones we've talked about, your LinkedIn's, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. Seem to be doing a lot on there at the minute, so do come and join us over there. You can also sign up to our 2-weekly HeelanHub Herald, which is an email direct to your inbox every 2 weeks, containing even more business insight and tax tips. You can do that on our website, HeelanAssociates.co.uk. Scroll around for enough time and you'll get a pop-up that will just put your email address in. We do not sell that to anybody, so don't worry, it is just for the insight. And then finally, if you're in the digital world and or maybe you're not in the digital world at the moment and you're looking for accountancy packages, if you look at Xero, that's Xero with an X, they're my personal favorite. We have brand partnerships with several of these software companies as a business, and this is always the one that I go to for me. And then you can get a great deal on that at the moment. If you go to HeelanAssociates.co.uk/0, helps us. There's a great deal right now. If you want to get in touch about the podcast or anything else, you can do so at info@HeelanAssociates.co.uk, or these shows go out on YouTube on our side YouTube channel at the HeelanHub. They're about a week behind, so do go in there. You can drop in the comments, and every week I'll pop in and answer as many as I can for you. So I hope you've enjoyed the show. Have a profitable and tax efficient week, and I'll see you in the next one.